I didn't know that you created the first powwow in America or just in that state.
The first Two Spirit powwow.
Two Spirit, sorry.
Specifically.
You invented powwows?
I invented powwows in 1942.
Yeah. But you started the first one in America.
Yeah,
all of Turtle Island, I understand.
Yes.
Yeah.
We used to have these, we just had the 37th International Two Spirit Gathering.
Which was just the other day.
Yes, it was in Oklahoma for the first time. I couldn't believe that it was the first time.
Hello, and welcome back to another amazing episode of Denhta. For new people that are listening today, Denhta in my Kaska language means hello, how are you? It's a greeting, which I think is fantastic for the conversations that I have with fellow Indigenous people. And I have an amazing guest here with me coming all the way from America, Landa Lakes.
Hello, it's good to be here. In our language, we say chukma.
Chukma?
Chukma.
Oh, nice.
It means good, and it also means to make things beautiful.
Oh, nice.
It's a good word.
It's a good one, chukma. Same with Denhta. I say that it's hi, how are you, but it's so much more than that. It's just a greeting between friends and family, and it could just mean hi, or in the context could be asking how you are. Like with the inflection, like Denhta, and then they start talking about their life.
Chukma is also, if you want to specifically know how someone is doing, then you basically say chukma, chima chukma, which is like everything's beautiful. Are you beautiful?
I love that. Chikma, chikma,
Chima chukma. So it's a chukma.
chikma, chima chukma.
Chima chukma. Yes.
Everything's beautiful. Are you beautiful?
Yes, I am. I feel great today.
That's good.
So
Yay.
thank you.
I'm very happy you're here. I met Landa last year. Or was it earlier this year? No, last year.
Last year.
Yeah, at our Healing Our Spirits conference here in Vancouver. And I just fell in love with you. Oh. But what was wild is that I met her out of drag at a restaurant. And then we met up in the room in drag. And I had no idea who she was. And I was like, hi, nice to meet you. And gave you a hug. Yes. And you looked at me like I was a fool. And I was like, oh my God, Landa.
I was okay because at the restaurant when we initially met, you confused somebody else for somebody else. So I just thought to myself, oh, I guess Ella needs some glasses.
And I do need glasses. I do need glasses. And I loved it yesterday when I talked about you. This person that I confused them for, both gorgeous human beings, but one's just a lot more mature than the other one. And I asked, I was like, hey, how are you? Are you? And they're like, no, baby.
But yet at the same time, they have so much similarity.
They do.
Between them. They both pretty much have the same dance style. So that's true.
They do, same dance style, same like powerful persona that they have.
Yes.
They demand attention when they're there. I love them.
Absolutely. And they're completely comfortable in their skin. Mm-hmm. And I think that in itself carries a certain charisma that you don't just meet every day.
Yeah. And it's not something that you can create. It's either you're born with it or not.
It's true. It's true.
And they're very authentically themselves. But let's pivot back to you. Okay. Tell us a bit about yourself and what you do.
Sure. I'm Chickasaw, so I originally come from Oklahoma, but I've been out in San Francisco for many years, like over 30 years now. Nice. So I think I've lived longer now in San Francisco than I did when I was in Oklahoma. Yeah. So I guess I could officially say that I'm like Californian.
Yeah.
But in my heart, I never am. I'm always just like a very rural native. Yeah. And so that's how I always think of myself. But I don't know. I do a lot of stuff in the community. I've worked with the Bay Area American Indigenous Two Spirits, mm-hmm. which is a two-spirit organization in San Francisco that's been around for 25 years. We created the first two-spirit powwow. And not too long ago, I created the Weaving Spirits Festival, which is now in its 5th year.
Oh, amazing.
And so the Weaving Spirits Festival is a two-spirit performance festival. So we bring in two-spirit artists of all different forms to be highlighted into our show, which is really cool. This last year, we were able to bring in someone all the way from Brazil.
Oh, wow.
Some of the people down there, I think they're called Kunimai. Mm-hmm. They're people. So she came and she did this great performance art piece that was pretty impressive.
Nice. If you need to check her out, you need to follow her, Landa Lakes, on all social medias because she is everywhere. I didn't know that you created the first powwow in America or just in that state?
The first Two Spirit powwow.
Two Spirit, sorry.
Specifically.
Yeah. You invented powwows?
I invented powwows in 1942. Yeah.
But you started the first one in America.
Yeah,
North America. All of Turtle Island, I understand.
Yes.
Yeah.
We used to have these, we just had the 37th International Two Spirit Gathering.
Which was just the other day.
Yes, it was in Oklahoma for the first time. I couldn't believe that it was the first time.
Brought it home.
Yeah, because Oklahoma for the U.S. is known as Indian Territory, and it has 39 tribes.
Oh, wow.
And so I had assumed that it must have already been there, but it hadn't. It was the first time. Yeah. But we often have a powwow component to each of those because the international gathering is also very spiritual too. So we'll bring in like sweat lodges or whatever the specific people who are hosting bringing is their land. So it's their protocols. So we had stomp dance and things like that. But there's always been like a powwow component to the international gathering. And so it was fun for us to create a two-spirit powwow that was a public powwow that was completely open to anyone who wanted to come. And I think a lot of it was based on just the fact that when I grew up in Oklahoma, we'd go to what was then one of the largest powwows, which was called Red Earth. Yeah. And me and my best friend, we flipped the script a lot. Sometimes we were male presenting, sometimes we were female presenting, just depending on what we felt like because we were young. So we'd go to the Red Earth and feel very excluded. Yeah. But yet, I don't know if you've heard of a 49. Do you know what a 49 is?
No.
In the States, there's like an after party for a powwow. And it's called a 49, and then you have 49 songs and things like that. But it's actually the place that you go to after a powwow where, you
have a few drinks
and things like that you can't do at a regular powwow. Yeah. And so they welcomed us there. We were welcome.
Come on in.
Yeah, we were welcome to come party.
These traditional parts, though, you can't.
Yes.
Ceremonial, but let's have a drink together. That's weird.
But not in the daylight. Yeah. That's really the key point. Oh. It's not in the daylight. Mm-hmm. They don't want people seeing us and then just assuming that natives are like this. Yeah. So because of that, I think that really is what sort of really pushing a powwow for us to do at Bates. And it was funny because I had just stepped down as co-chair at the time and somebody else has stepped up and I had been pushing like this powwow thing for a while. And so she said, "Oh, what should we do this year?" I said, "We should do a powwow." And she said, "Yeah, let's do it." And I was, "Wait, what?"
There's support?
Right? And it had just so happened that Ruth Villasenor, who had become the co-chair, had just participated in the Richmond powwow, which had just been built up, and this woman, Courtney, had just done it. And so she saw the backbone of the powwow. And so she finally understood that we could put on a powwow. We could do a mini one. And so we did that 14 years ago.
Nice.
We did this little two-spirit powwow, and we didn't give it a name. Some places have names, like Red Earth or something, Gathering of Nations, something like that. We were just like two-spirit powwow. That was...
to the point.
That was all that we called it. Across. Yeah. And so then, boom, it happened, and we expected like about 250 people maybe, because we did it at the LGBT Community Center on the second floor in the Rainbow Room. So we were like, oh, maybe 250 people will show up. Yeah. No, there's a big turnout. Everybody wanted to come to it. Yeah. So we had 500 people.
Oh, amazing.
So we were like, oh, this is great, but we need a bigger space because we took over the Rainbow Room and then started taking over other floors.
That day?
Yes, that day. All of a sudden, we had all these vendors that showed up and wanted to show their wares to you. We didn't expect these non-LGBT vendors to want to participate, but there they were. And so we said, okay, yes, absolutely, join us. So the next year we decided to do it bigger. And at the time we had an idea that we were going to move it from San Francisco to Oakland to San Francisco to Oakland each year. Mm-hmm. And so we moved it to Oakland that year and we did it in like a church.
I love that.
Yes, but it was a very welcoming church. So it was in a church and it was big enough for 500 people. Yeah. 1,000 people showed up. So we're inside the church and outside the church now. All of our vendors started setting up outside. Yeah. So we were like, oh my God, we have to get an even bigger place. And so finally we arrived at Fort Mason, which is where we've had it for the last maybe 10 years. Mm-hmm. And what's really impressive about it is that now between 5,000 to 6,000 people come.
It's amazing.
We've not outgrown that space yet, but who knows? Maybe one day we'll outgrow that
It could
space
happen.
too. But what was beautiful about the Two Spirit Powwow is that we brought in our rainbow flag, and then some of the local powwows started bringing in a rainbow flag.
Yeah.
And now it's not surprising if you go to a powwow and you'll see a rainbow flag being brought in. And I think that's really cool and special. But then Turtle Island woke up and said, okay, we're going to have a Two-Spirit powwow. So I love the fact that we've had some annual powwows that keep going on in Salt Lake City, in Phoenix, Arizona. They've been having annual powwows. Edmonton has an annual powwow. So like these Two-Spirit powwows have grown up. Even Haskell, which is known as a predominantly native school, it started out as an Indian school and then became Haskell Indian College. And so they had a Two-Spirit powwow, which I thought was very impressive because it's in Kansas and Lawrence, Kansas. And I was like, oh, that's pretty amazing. That's really cool. So they've had a Two-Spirit powwow. So it's just beautiful to see these powwows come up. And I love the fact that they also just call it Two-Spirit powwow. Yes.
Just give it a name. That's so great that you saw a need and you had a little bit of pushback at the beginning, but then once you started it, you're like, we're growing. Like can't house them, and then it got bigger and bigger, and now you got this place where it's just blossomed.
Yeah.
And you were at the forefront of that.
It was cool because for me, what I felt was so excluded when I was younger that I wanted it to be welcoming, and I wanted it to be welcoming to all people, which is also one of the reasons why we degendered all the categories, because quite often at a powwow, you'll have something called women's jingle, men's fancy.
Traditional.
And it's very gendered. It has those names in it. And we were like, how can we degender them? And then we just realized we just
Call it fancy.
Yes. Call it jingle. That's all you
That's all you
needed.
need.
And boom, it was fine. And if you go to our powwow, you'll see that it's a regular powwow. It's a traditional powwow. No one's showing up in tutus,
Exactly. It's just
waving rainbow flags or anything. It's just a regular powwow. And so we've had dancers of all types come, LGBT plus, of course, hetero. It doesn't really matter to us. Everybody is welcomed, and all of our community shows out. It's not just very specific to one group. It's to all Indigenous
being
people.
inclusive.
Yes.
Like creating unity. Yeah, I hear that about the genderized because I was part of the organized community of the first Two-Spirit powwow in Kamloops and, not Kamloops, Kelowna and Vernon this past summer. And that was fantastic. And we had a whip man come in for the Vernon one. And then we're introducing the dances. He's, okay, when are we doing the men's and when are we doing the women's? And I was like, oh, sorry. No one must have told you this is a Two-Spirit powwow, that it's non-gendered. And it took him a moment to figure it out, because we didn't have a Two-Spirit whipman. We're going with what our area had to create things.
Yes.
So this person came in, grateful, very kind person, but he just didn't get the idea of getting rid of the gender. Then after we did one, he's, oh, I get it. Everyone's welcome. And I was like, yeah, that's how it is. Everyone's welcome. But sometimes you just have these conversations and it changes everything. And sometimes you realize that we have these conversations between like-minded people. It seems common. Then you realize that some people just haven't heard it yet, but they're willing to learn.
Yes.
Which I think is amazing.
It did take us a while also before we could fill all of our positions with Two-Spirit people, because some people were Two-Spirit too, and they just weren't out and open about it. So they weren't ready yet to step into that role. But at our last powwow, all the roles were assumed by Two-Spirit people for really the first time.
That's amazing.
Yes.
That's the goal as well. But if it doesn't happen, we want to showing unity, showing inclusion. They're all welcome, and we want to create a great event.
Yeah, we love allies too. We love people who are willing to do it. When we first started, it was our worry that maybe we couldn't get people to allies to come and fill those spots. But no, we've had a lot of people who very much encourage it. And just to give you like a dynamic of what has happened in the Bay Area, the first Native LGBT organization that ever existed was founded in San Francisco.
Oh, wow.
In 1975. They're about to celebrate their 50th year this next year in 2025. It was founded GAI, Gay American Indians. And when they founded that, they would go to powwows as like vendors, and people would overturn their tables. Yeah. They would tell them that they weren't wanted there.
Oh, wow.
And everything, but they remained consistent, staying within the Indigenous community and continuing to do outreach and education that we are a part of the community and that we belong in our community. And now when you look at the dichotomy, that's a big word,
It is.
dichotomy of San Francisco, you'll see the Indigenous community has a lot of Two Spirit people that are very involved in it. So it's interesting how it has built up from what it was. And I'm really thankful to GAI, because without GAI, Bates would have never really started.
Yeah.
And even back in Oklahoma, before I ever came to San Francisco, I had already known about GAI because we had a periodical in Oklahoma called The Gaily Oklahoman.
Oh, and you got it every week.
And I did. You had to know what was going on.
Yeah.
In the back of it, it had all these classifieds and everything. And GAI would sometimes put in an advertisement about gay American Indians, come join us. And I always thought that was really fascinating and neat. And
Especially coming from a small town. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. There's more like me.
Yeah. When we say small town, I'm from a community called Tupelo.
Yeah.
And in the Tupelo community, I looked it up one day. I think our greatest population growth was like 350 people.
Yeah.
But typically, like in town itself, in the town complex, it's 250 people, and then the additional 100 or so are like spread out.
So very small community.
Very small community.
Understand that because I grew up in a town that had 300 people in it.
Yes.
So and then spread it out afterwards. But the city center itself was like, I think 300. So I understand the small town.
So when I grew up, I didn't have a lot of discrimination, I don't think, as being like a queer person, but only because I was surrounded by so many relatives. I don't know if you know what allotments are, but in Oklahoma, when our tribes were condensed, so we had a large area, and there was this person that created something called the Dawes Commission, who basically said the root of civilization is greed.
Yeah.
And so they split up our land rather than having a large reserve. Yeah. So they split up our land to individual properties. So also people could sell their land if they were in need and diminish the size of the tribe and how big it was and everything. But yeah, a lot of our allotments were right in that area. So that's why I had so much family around me, was because our allotments were all right in that area.
Thanks. I want to talk about you moving to San Francisco, because you from that small town in Oklahoma and then moving to San Francisco to a bigger metropolitan city and being Indigenous. Did you have any pushback when that happened, being an Indigenous person into a bigger city? But also, I don't know why I'm saying that. San Francisco's so above everywhere else, I feel.
It was very weird for me. First, when I left Oklahoma, I went into the military. So I went in the military, and there was a military campaign that was going on at the time. So I went and I was involved in that because I felt it was very important to become a part of my tribe's warrior society, because I knew that like my dad really wanted me to be a part of the warrior society. So I went and I became part of the warrior society. My father is part of the warrior society. He was in the Air Force and the Army, so he's double warrior. I don't know. But I went into the Navy, and then after I got out of the Navy, I settled in San Francisco, and it was the first time I ever lived in a city.
Yeah.
I'd never lived in a city. I had always lived very rurally, out in the middle of nowhere, and like your closest relatives or your closest neighbors are your relatives. Yeah. And even if they're not your relatives, they're claim to be your relatives. I'm always like, I don't know how they're my cousins, but they are.
They're cousins. Yeah. That's so true with all Native families. In my small town as well, everyone's like, that's your cousin. I'm like, how? I don't know. All right, fine.
Yeah, sometimes I try to figure it out. And but for legal purposes, we have something called the Indian Mineral Rights Act. And so outside of our tribal identification, we have a mineral number as well. So it's for mineral royalties. Yeah. Because you sell the upper part of your land, but you don't sell like the stuff underneath. So anytime they start doing oil or gas or something like that, then
you get rights to it.
You have rights to it. If
that's on your allotment.
If it's on your allotment or your former allotment that you sold the top of it, but you retain the rights underneath. Yeah. Oh, nice. Yeah, so it gets very complicated in Oklahoma. Yeah. And I'm not even sure why I brought that up, but there is a reason, and I'm now...
It's interesting, though. I've never heard of it.
I'm hitting my senior years. So.
Yeah. Things just come out. Right. There's a reason behind it.
I felt like there was a reason. Now I can't remember what my reason was.
What were we talking about? Talking about identity, moving to a big city. You never lived in a big city before.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I guess because I never really lived in a big city before. I was always very rural. We lived out in the middle of nowhere. So living in a city was a complete new experience for me. And what more was in San Francisco, my identity disappeared because in the city, people don't know what you are when they see you, which was strikingly different from Oklahoma. I had grown up always being indigenous because people would say, oh, that Indian kid over there. Yeah. And we use Indian quite a lot back in Oklahoma, back when I was a kid. So it's hard for me to erase that from my vocabulary. I try to say indigenous a lot, but in my mind, it's always Indian.
Indian was very commonly used.
Yes.
Say all the time, or Injun, you'd say.
Oh, not that one. But because of that, my self-identity was so tied to how people perceived me. And then when you went to San Francisco, people didn't perceive you that way anymore. And most of the time when I was in the city, nobody really knew what I was or really cared. And so when I got there, then I had to seek out the indigenous community out there that existed. And the first thing that I found was GAI. And I knew I didn't really belong to that. I knew that I didn't really vibe as much with that organization as I would have hoped. I had great hope, but unfortunately I didn't vibe as much because I've always been a person that's never drank, never smoked, never did drugs. I'm very vanilla. Yeah. And so when I came to the organization, they were more of a party organization. And it just wasn't my thing. I wasn't really into that. Yeah. So I didn't vibe as much with that. But then when Bates started, one of the things that they had in their programs was about sobriety and clean and sober. And even though I don't identify as being clean and sober because I've never drank, I've never done anything. Yeah. So, but I'm very mixed into that community just because that's how I live my life. But it's only because I come from an area also that was pretty
a lot of abuse, substance
abuse.
Yeah.
Lots and lots. And it was weird because my mother is white and my father is Chickasaw. And it was sad to me because it was the Chickasaw side of my family that had so many of the issues. And then the white side was always like, why? Yeah.
Like past trauma. Like we won't get into it one day. That's interesting when you talk about how back home you were always known as the Indian kid child, because that's the same with myself. Back home, people recognize a lot more in northern Yukon. And then when I moved to the city as well, they didn't know what I was. I was culturally ambiguous.
Yes.
So I was just the gay boy. Because I was always flamboyant. And I always get the same thing. I think you mentioned earlier, people thought that you were Latino.
Yes.
And I get that every time I travel to Mexico. Sorry, they just instantly start speaking to me in Spanish, which I don't mind, but I don't know a lot of Spanish. So I'm like, I don't know what's going on. I was in Thailand this year, and they just started talking to me in Thai. And then I'd stand up, and they notice I'm a lot taller. And they'd be like, oh, you're not from here. And that was you. Same thing, being culturally ambiguous, moving into a big city.
Yeah.
I think your big booty gave you away, you said.
I know. It's true. It's true. It's from the white side.
Yeah. So. I want to pivot back to your performance because that's how I met you. And pretty much every performance that I've seen of you or that you share on social media are very culturally driven. Do you always try to infuse your culture into your performance aspect?
It depends. Yeah. Like a lot of times, a lot of my performances do have to deal somewhat with things that I'm dealing with. I have one number that is not indigenous at all, really, but it's all about dieting and food because I've had such an issue with like my weight. I go up, I go down, I go up, I go down. And so I have a whole performance that's based around that. But there's a lot of like my larger performances, I would say, where I do infuse it a lot with my own culture. And a lot of times I infuse a lot of specifically Chickasaw and Southeastern tribal teachings and understandings. And one of the things that I do too is when I bring them in, sometimes I don't feel like I need to be an educator. So I'm not really going to necessarily educate people on exactly what the meaning of each of the pieces. And I feel comfortable with that because I feel like if someone who is Southeastern from Southeastern culture, they will see some of these elements and they will understand. They'll just automatically understand what it is. And that's beautiful to me. Yeah. And even if you don't necessarily understand the little pieces that I have to it, you will still follow and understand the story. Yeah. And it's hard for me to get away from doing things so culturally relevant only because I grew up in such a small place where culture was like a big part of my life. When I was very young, just a kid, my family started our own dance troupe. Yeah. Because in the 1970s, it was a resurgence of culture because a lot of the culture had not been practiced for so long. And after the Religious Freedom Act passed, all of a sudden everybody was like, we're going to revive these dances. We're going to pull these dances back out. We're going to play this music again. And so my family was always involved in stomp dance. And it was like one of those things that you did on near Labor Day or something. You went to these big stomp dances and stuff like that. But it was also very quiet. And at that point, all of a sudden, all of our community dances just blossomed and they started coming about. So my family was called the Buck Creek Dancers, and we were in parades and we did little exhibitions and stuff like that. So It was really cool. But it's a funny story in a way.
Yes.
My great-grandfather was what they call a Chickasaw charge preacher.
Chickasaw charge preacher.
Yes.
Okay.
Chickasaw charge was a group of Chickasaw speakers that were ministers, and they would go to different churches. So a Chickasaw charge preacher might go to a Presbyterian church or a Baptist church and preach whatever doctrine that they had. But they would move around. So it was like the list of preachers that spoke Chickasaw that went out to these places. Yeah. So he was a minister, right? So his wife was a traditionalist. And so he had some struggle with that because he was always trying to not only convert the masses, but his own wife. Yeah. And then after she passed, then his sons had not become Christian yet either. So he married a woman who was Choctaw and said, now I'm going to have this Christian woman. And this Christian woman had a grandson named Buster Ned and came to live a lot with his grandmother. And he is like the pivotal person in this whole movement of retaining all the dances. He never became a Christian either. So my poor great-grandfather never got his own sons as Christians. And then the great-grandson of this Christian woman he thought was going to be like maybe somebody he could mentor into being a Christian too. Also didn't. No. And then he became like such a big movement in retaining the dances and bringing back stomp that he started the Chickasaw Choctaw. The Chickasaw Choctaw dance troupe was what it was. It was just known that, and it was the Chickasaw Choctaw Cultural Retainment Society, I think is what it was called. So he started all this and started putting it all together. So even though my grandfather and my great-grandfather come from like this sort of like very Christianized history, they still kept a lot of the traditions alive, and there it was.
That's amazing. I love that. I love that it failed for your great-grandfather.
Right?
But also, it seems like you have a legacy to carry on, keeping culture into your performance, right? Like these people stepped against the grandfather to practice their dance.
Yes. Yeah. But I will say the first Chickasaw songs that I ever learned were hymns.
Hymns?
Were hymnals, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. When my grandfather would get hoxie, which is drunk, when he'd get hoxie, he would always make me and my sister sit down and sing
hymns.
Choctaw hymns.
Choctaw hymns. So sorry.
Okay, here's the weird part. So we're Chickasaw, right? Yeah. But our the Bible that Chickasaws use and the hymnals that Chickasaws use are all Choctaw because our language is very related. It's just dialectically different. Yeah. There's a few things too. There's some odd things that Choctaws throw in that we don't really throw in too.
But very similar.
Very similar.
So if they spoke Choctaw, you'd understand most of it.
Yes. Actually, they did something not too long ago. They did like this analysis thing, and they found that Chickasaws were very likely to understand things that Choctaw speakers said. Yeah. But
not the other way around.
Not the other way around. And I think that has to do with just the fact that we use their hymnals and we use their Bibles. So, of course, we understand Choctaw.
That makes sense.
But they don't use anything of ours, so they don't always understand us. And we have a habit of also shortening all of our words. So where you might say yamat, we might just say mat.
Yeah.
So we start condensing everything. So it's slightly.
It's fantastic you say that, because earlier before we started the podcast, we're talking about the new Chickasaw speakers.
Yes.
How they shorten a word to say no, but it doesn't mean that.
Well, they're
It
using
doesn't,
the
it
word.
doesn't. Yeah.
They're using the word like it means no, and it's not really no. It's more like un. Un. It means un. So ungood or un something. You can't just say un.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense, but they do now. That's what they're pulling from English. So they're like, oh yeah, I'll just apply it here. Yeah. And so far, they're keeping a lot of our Chickasaw structure, because our language structure is we put all the nouns first.
Yeah.
We noun, and then we do the verb, and then depending on, we have a lot of pronouns.
Yeah.
No gendered pronouns, but we do have a lot of pronouns that are dependent upon the verb.
Yeah.
So it's
Is
funny.
it difficult to learn, or once you get it, it's understandable?
I grew up with it, so I say it's very easy.
That makes sense. I'm relearning my language, and it's hard because I'm not super good with language to begin with, but we speak like Yoda.
Oh, yes.
Like, how do you say, like he says it first, we go, or here we go. That's how we speak in ours. And where was I going with this with the language? With shortening things and learning it. Anyways, it's hard for me to learn because it's speaking. I'm used to putting in English how the words line up.
Right.
And I have to think outside of that, because I'm learning that eat is here, but it's eat, I am.
Okay, yeah.
So I got to remember that the verb goes first, and then the pronoun, or the I, the personalization of it.
Yeah. For us, it depends. It's very dependent upon what's a part of you, for instance. So, for instance, I might say sabana, which is I want. But I might say aya, li being the pronoun here, meaning I go.
Yeah.
And the reason that we put li at the end is because going is not a part of us.
Yeah.
Whereas to want is a part of us. To remember is a part of us. So that's the pronouns we use as sa. But if it was more of an action verb, then we use li. And then we also use that for other people too. So we might say e for somebody, but then we might say chi for somebody. Yeah. So it gets mixed up. And
But once you know the rules, then
once you know, yes,
the rules of the language.
And I would say it's very easy because I think that if you look at all of our words like a dictionary, then you'll find that we have a very condensed language. Yeah. And so one thing can mean many things.
It's contextual.
Yes. Yeah. So we might say Homa. You've heard of Oklahoma, right? Yeah. Okla is people and Homa is red. Yeah. So
red people.
Yeah, so red people. But Homa doesn't just mean red. It can mean other things too. It can mean sacred. Something is sacred if it's red. So we're not really red people. We're sacred people. Yeah, we're the sacred people. And this comes from a treaty that we signed with the U.S. government. The Chickasaw and Choctaw signed it. And we called the Chickasaws and Choctaw as Oklahoma.
That's so cool.
Was who we were, yeah.
Didn't know that. The more you know.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's how Oklahoma came into being.
I love that.
And we were this far from calling Oklahoma Sequoia. Because there's a very famous writer who created the Chickasaw syllabary, and they wanted to call the state of they wanted to have an independent state that was just indigenous, and they were going to call it Sequoia. And then in the end, they just called it Oklahoma.
Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Amazing. Love that.
Yeah. They refused to let us have our own state.
Like too much.
But they kept our Chickasaw Choctaw word.
Nice. Love that. Okay. I have one more thing to discuss before we go. And that was at this Healing Our Spirit. You did this fantastic number, which was about the 215 kids found in Kamloops.
Oh, yes.
Right? And it was Healing Our Spirit. It was a very thought-provoking number. It was a thought-provoking day at the conference. And I'm not specifically going to talk about your number. I'm going to talk about the number afterwards. Because I talk about this all the time. Because if you ever have the chance to see this, I don't know if it's ever recorded. if it was. They do a fantastic number representing the 215 kids found. And then right after the number, this beautiful burlesque person comes on, and their song is "How Many Licks Does It Take to get to the center of?" So we had this very intense number, and then we had this juxtaposition of this very sex-driven number, which I feel like was fantastic because healing our spirit is healing everything, right? We're not just healing the history. We're learning to get rid of the sexual shame of colonization. We're learning to accept ourselves and our bodies and who we are. Did you witness that number afterwards? Because I think you left the room right away after your number because you had a lot of props.
Yes, I left and then I came back around and I watched. I really love things like that. I don't like I have a traveling show called the Land Back Tour. Mm-hmm. And so we've been all over the States and Canada, and we've been to different places. And I'm not really into tragedy porn. Yeah. I also think that it has to have other things into it.
Yeah,
other
you need
elements.
to have a wave.
Yeah,
so you can feel
absolutely.
So it's not just down. If it's too much intensity, sometimes you leave the event emotionally tired. Yeah.
Yeah. So sometimes I'll have a really camp number to help balance it out because I feel like laughter is important medicine. Mm-hmm. I also feel like sometimes holding things accountable and being able to be sad and elicit that sadness is something special too. Yeah. So I think we should have all the emotions.
I agree. We should be able to take them on a journey, on that roller coaster, like ups and downs. I agree with that 100%, which is why I loved that those two numbers placed together, because it was like a very polarizing view of that, because one was so intense and then one was so sexual. And I just love them beside each other because they both tell a different story.
Yes.
Yeah. It's fantastic.
Yeah, and I love that. I love that about performance too. Like even at this last Weaving Spirits festival that we did, the emphasis was on ecology. Mm-hmm. And we called it Seeding Native Fires. That was the theme, was Seeding Native Fires. But yet my piece was like mainly all about water. Yeah. So it had a lot of my poetry and everything written into it. And then afterwards, the performance that happened after mine was of a woman talking about the rape of the land, the rape of the territories, and stuff like that. And then she starts pulling seeds out of her nether regions, one after the other. She just flips over and just starts pulling all this stuff out. And I couldn't help but think, oh, I'm glad Auntie isn't in the front row.
Just fully watching it. I love that. Landa, thank you so much for being here with you. You're such an amazing, powerful individual. Do you want to say some final words or where people can find you to give you a follow and see what you're doing?
Sure. If you want to follow me on Instagram is the best place to follow me. And that's Instagram Landa Lakes. You can find it really quickly. You could follow me on Facebook, but I have too many friends. And
you might not get in.
and so you max out at 5,000. Mm-hmm. Then there's the fan page. Yeah. And just so everybody knows, I don't update that fan page. I have not taken really great care of that fan page because like I think of myself as a very humble person, and I'm like, do I have fans? I don't know.
But you do.
But Instagram is like the best way to follow me, and I'll post flyers there, and I'll say where I'm going to be and everything. But yeah,
make sure to follow. She comes to Canada often.
I do. And I really enjoy coming to Canada. I've had such a good time here. Every time that I'm here, I've been able to hang out with my relatives that are up north, and that always feels like a blessing. I feel the same way about going to any kind of international gathering of any sort. I always feel so good to be around other Indigenous people. I love my Indigenous community, and I think having been in San Francisco for so long, for me, I got a little lonely for a while because I was struggling to find where I really fit in, and it wasn't until Bates came along that I was really able to fit in. And so
build that community.
And if you want to hang with me, please do so. But just know that in my personal life, I'm very shy. I'm very reserved.
Drag, she isn't.
I am not shy in drag.
Your big old ponytail's being whipped around.
Right.
Yes, make sure to follow Landa Lakes. She's amazing. She's such a powerful individual. And I wish we had more time because we didn't even talk about your husband of 22 years. But another time we'll talk about that. She's so, wait, she doesn't sober. She's never drank or anything. She's purity.
Purity,
Goddess.
except on stage, and it's like a different person,
literally. And thank you so much. I hope you have a good rest of your day. And as far as people that know, I'm going to be seeing you later.
Thank you for inviting me here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Masicho. Make sure to like, subscribe, and follow Rebellious Unicorn Studios. Bye bye.